Mr. Chairman, Professor Benedict Orama, President of the AfCFTA, His Excellency Mohammed Ahmed Mayit, Minister of Finance of Egypt and Chairman of the AfCFTA General Meeting, His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner of Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mining, and African Union Commissioner, His Excellency the Prime Minister of Bahamas, Mr. Philip Davis, His Excellency the former President of the Republic of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, His Excellency the former Vice President of Nigeria, Mr. Namadi Sambu, His Excellency Muhammadu Issoufou, former President of Niger and AfCFTA Champion Site Oversight Committee, His Excellency Yves Ferman Mamfoubi, Minister of Trade and Industry of Gabon and Chair of the African Ministers of Trade and Industry, His Excellency Honorable Kerry Simons, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, Her Excellency Dr. Vera Songwe, Board Chair, Liquidity and Sustainability Facility and former head of international and continental organizations, all protocols observed, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and let me take this opportunity to wish all fathers in the house a happy Father's Day. On behalf of the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, I say a big welcome, or Akwaba, to Accra, Ghana, for this year's AfCFTA annual meetings. The 30th annual meetings also coincide with the celebration of AfCFta's 30th anniversary. So let me thank the bank for choosing Ghana as the host of your 30th anniversary landmark events. Indeed, Accra, Ghana also hosts the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which makes it the most appropriate place to commemorate 3 decades of successes in promoting intra-African trade by Africa's foremost trade finance institution, the AfCFTA. Mr. Chairman, the overarching theme for this year's meetings is delivering the vision, building prosperity for Africans. The chosen theme appropriately offers an opportunity to all stakeholders gathered here not only to celebrate the success of AfCFTA over the last 30 years, but also to reflect on how we can meaningfully contribute to Africa's recovery process after the pandemic and speed up intra-African trade, improve Africa's trade performance in the global marketplace through the creation of a single market for goods and services, promote industrial development through diversification and regional value chain development, and also enhance capital flows into Africa. Since its establishment 3 decades ago, AfCFTA has transitioned into a first-class supranational financial institution, championing African trade and driving growth across multiple sectors in Africa. Evidence of the bank's interventions are numerous, and includes infrastructural investments to support intra-African trade, investments in agriculture and industry, trade facilitation, trade guarantee and advisory services, and country-specific programs to support those in dire economic situations, among others. AfCFTA has also introduced platforms designed to improve and facilitate trade in Africa, including the Mansa Repository Platform, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement Systems, and the Intra-African Trade Fair. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, during the last 3 decades, AfCFTA has achieved several milestones in line with the vision of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. That vision encapsulates not only Africa's aspirations for the future, but also identifies flagship programs which can boost Africa's economic growth. The highlights of the accomplishments directly relate to upscaling intra-African trade through AfCFTA's collaborations, programs, and projects, and include the establishment of the AfCFTA's Trade Impact Mitigation Facility platform, where AfCFTA intervened strongly during the COVID-19 pandemic and disbursed over $8 billion to central banks and commercial banks to avert trade payment defaults. Part of this funding also went into the procurement of test kits, personal protective equipment, and other COVID-19 containment materials in member states. The bank also disbursed over $5 billion to member states and businesses towards the procurement of food, fertilizer, and grains as the Russian-Ukraine crisis unfolded. Working with the UNECA, the African Union, and the AfCFTA Secretariat, AfCFTA created a pooled procurement platform termed as the Africa Trade Exchange to help African countries procure grains, edible oils, and fertilizers at reduced costs. Prior to the implementation of the AfCFTA in 2021, AfCFTA disbursed over $20 billion in support of intra-African trade and investments, and projected to double this to $40 billion by end December 2026. AfCFTA is also financing African-owned financial institutions to acquire foreign banks operating in member states with a view to building an interconnected African financial system to help promote intra-African trade. Also, through the AfCFTA Trade Finance Facility, about 500 of the continent's 600 regulated commercial banks have been provided with credit confirmation lines to support intra-African trade. The total amount earmarked for this project is about $8 billion. This funding is aimed at ensuring that every country on our continent has at least one bank that has a dedicated credit line to support intra-African trade. AfCFTA is also collaborating with the African Union Commission and the AfCFTA Secretariat to implement the biannual intra-African trade fairs, which may become the premier marketplace for the promotion of intra-African trade and investments. This, coupled with the establishment of the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund, for which AfCFTA is providing a funding of $10 billion, would help African countries effectively adjust to AfCFTA tariff removals and prepare them to participate in the new trading regime. Ladies and gentlemen, we in Ghana have also benefited from a cordial and productive relationship with AfCFTA over the years. To mention a few, AfCFTA's first official deal was the participation in a syndicated loan to the Ghana Cocoa Board. The bank also provided support to Ghana's Volta River Authority in 2014 to enhance energy generation and help resolve the energy crisis the country experienced during that time. AfCFTA has also had a good working relationship with us at the Bank of Ghana and facilitated foreign exchange swap arrangements with banks in Ghana to boost foreign exchange liquidity support for Ghana's international trade. Just recently, in the midst of Ghana's economic crisis, AfCFTA agreed to extend a $750 million loan facility to the country to finance capital growth-related expenditures in the 2022 budget. Over the years, various collaborations between Ghana and AfCFTA have resulted in a disbursement of over $2 billion to support various development and trade-related initiatives in Ghana. Your Excellencies, what clearly stands out in AfCFTA's journey over the past 30 years is its collaborative nature in pursuing initiatives, projects, and programs with other African institutions to achieve the African integration agenda. The planned events for this year's AfCFTA meetings will involve critical discussions across various sectors of our economies. So I encourage all of you to participate actively and help broaden the policy discourse with your contributions towards the prosperity of the African continent and its people. I would also urge you all, especially those visiting Accra for the first time, to find time to explore the city, participate in the planned discussions, and enjoy your stay in Ghana. We wish you a pleasant stay in our country. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause, please, for our host, Governor Addison. Now, we also are graced with the presence of another Pan-African champion and a peacemaker extraordinaire, His Excellency, the former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, is with us. Now, from its inception, AfCFTA has been headquartered in Cairo. Egypt's not only been one of the founding shareholders of the bank, it's been an absolute outstanding host country. The Minister of Finance of Egypt is the chairman of this AfCFTA general meeting, and here to give the opening remarks on his behalf, I want you to welcome the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, His Excellency Gamal Negm.
Good morning. First, I would like to thank the government of Ghana for its great hospitality. Honorable former President, Prime Ministers, Governors, Ambassadors, and Ministers. Mr. Chairman of AfCFTA, esteemed guests, African Bank staff, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency, the Egyptian Minister of Finance, it gives me a great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome to the 30th annual meeting of the African Export-Import Bank held in this wonderful city, Accra, under the auspices of His Excellency, Mr. Nana Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana. The world economic and financial landscape remain uncertain. As the rest of the world, Africa is facing a number of challenges, from the residual effects of the pandemic, inflationary pressure magnified by the geopolitical tensions. Counting in global finance conditions, the growing impact of climate change, rising risk of debt distress in large number of countries, and the adverse effects on the demand for African exports. Therefore, there is strong need to boost regional trade and enact industrial policies for diversification to enhance Africa's resilience to spillover and to contagious effects from the global shocks. And here comes the pivotal role of African Bank across several streams, which are all anchored within the bank's six strategic plan for the period 22-26, focusing on intra-Africa trade, Africa industrialization, and the continental trade leadership in a financially sustainable manner. In this regard, we have to applaud the bank for its efforts and the achievements during 2022 in developing and implementing new solutions to alleviate the negative repercussions from global shocks on the continent. In light of these considerations comes the importance of this year's theme, delivering the vision, building prosperity for Africans, which affirms that leading institutions like AfCFTA have to work collectively towards an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens, representing a dynamic force in the international arena. Also, the theme strongly aligns AfCFTA's endeavor with the 2063 agenda and the Africa we want. With this esteemed gathering and level of participation, I hope this year's meetings will introduce advanced experiences, exchange thought on cutting-edge theories, and propose constructive ideas and suggestions for the development and prosperity of Africa. I would like to conclude by wishing the AfCFTA every success and successful annual meeting that support its mandate as one of the leading regional institutions that deliver the 2063 vision. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Just before we started the proceedings, I was having a chat with him and I asked him what his name meant, Gamal Negm, and he said his name means beautiful star. And I think that Egypt has been a beautiful star in the history of AfCFTA, wouldn't you say? What an incredible room is gathered here today. It's just incredible. We also have the Honorable Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, Minister of Finance over the Republic of Ghana. Please acknowledge him. My dear elder brother is here, His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade and Industry and Mining at the African Union Commission, has graced us with his presence. The Right Honourable Philip Davis, all the way, this is a long way to come, the Prime Minister of Bahamas and the Chair of CARICOM is also here with us. Staying on the theme of Pan-African champions, we have Ms. Nardos Bekele Thomas, CEO of African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. And last but not least, I think I'm told that Madame Zuma, the first woman chairperson of the African Union Commission, is here somewhere. I've not had sight on her. She's here. There you are, right over there. Welcome. Welcome, Ma. The governor mentioned that, of course, Ghana is quite an appropriate place to have the 30th anniversary because it is also home of the AfCFTA Secretariat. The AfCFTA holds within it our hopes and our dreams and our aspirations. I always see it more as not my hopes, but the hopes for my children and your children and the future of Africa.
The man at the helm of the AfCFTA Secretariat is, of course, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General, and he's here with us to give us a few words. Please come to the podium, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Program Director. May I acknowledge the presence here of our former leaders, President Mahamadou Issoufou, former President of Niger and champion of the African Continental Free Trade Area, President Obasanjo, former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, former Vice President also of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, my senior brother, President Orama, the board of directors of AfCFTA, the CEO of Auda Nepad, ministers that are here with us, finance ministers, governors of central banks, our host, Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be with you here today as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of AfCFTA, an institution that, as we all know, has been at the fore of investing in trade finance in Africa. AfCFTA celebrates 30 years. And this coincides with the 60th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity. In May 1963 is when the OAU was formed. And our founding mothers and fathers, in their wisdom and in their vision, actually already foresaw that there has to be an AfCFTA. That is why, in accordance with that vision of our founding mothers and fathers, if you look at the treaty documents that establish the Organization of African Unity, they clearly set out an objective, and that objective is that we must have economic integration in Africa, and that we must introduce tools to advance that objective of economic integration in Africa. Payments, a seamless payments system, an intra-Africa trade fair, trade finance that is affordable, inclusivity of trade, to make sure that young entrepreneurs, women-led small medium enterprises, that they have an opportunity to contribute to an integrated market in Africa. And so all of these tools, all of these things that AfCFTA has been doing over the last 30 years were foresaw in the founding treaty of the Organization of African Unity. And all of the past presidents, and I know that some of them are here, the past presidents of AfCFTA have also singularly focused on this objective of integration in Africa and trade finance. And so I'm extremely proud that the AfCFTA Secretariat, under the overall leadership of His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, that the AfCFTA Secretariat is a very strong partner to AfCFTA, and I said this previously. AfCFTA and the AfCFTA Secretariat are like twins, except one twin was born 30 years earlier, the other twin was born 30 years later. But This relationship is important because if you don't have the finance, after you have eliminated all the barriers to trade that exist, your effort will come to zero. And similarly, if you have the trade finance, but the trade barriers remain, the effort and the objective of AfCFTA will come to naught. And so we have a mutually complementary relationship which shares the objective that comes as far back as May 1963, when our founding mothers and fathers in the great city of Addis Ababa decided that they will establish the Organization of African Unity. We have taken this relationship further under the leadership of President Orama and the board, as well as under the leadership of President Issoufou. We have introduced, as you know, the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. Soon we will introduce an Africa-wide transit guarantee scheme. And all of these tools are important because they make trade accessible, they make trade a reality, they reduce the cost of trade, so that across the length and breadth of our continent, millions and millions of small medium enterprises that are led by women, that are led by young entrepreneurs, can see the benefits of a market that we correctly define as a market that by the year 2050 will have a combined GDP of 16.2 trillion United States dollars. But we have to build the future now. We have to build 2050 now. That is why the partnership with AfCFTA is so critical. And I know that my colleagues in the African Union, in the overall family of the African Union, Ambassador Muchanga is here, CEO Nados is here. All of us in the African Union depend on AfCFTA for your support, for your wisdom, and of course to make sure that as Africans, we create and define our own narrative. That as Africans, we rely on ourselves, and that as Africans, it is ourselves, our own institutions, that will create the better future that we want to see. Former chairperson of the African Union Commission, as you've heard, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is here with us this morning, and in being the principal architect of Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, embedded in it is the AfCFTA as one of the flagship projects. And so I am extremely proud that today we join AfCFTA in celebrating 30 years, and I hope that we will continue the very, very strong partnership for Africa's economic advancement and the advancement of our shared ideals that have a long tradition and a long history. The AfCFTA has been ratified by 47 state parties. Only one member of the African Union has not yet ratified. The political commitment is there. The political will is there. The tools that we require for success, as I mentioned, are there. The Adjustment Fund, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, and others are available at our disposal. And I'm also equally grateful that our heads of states and government have continued to entrust President Mahamadou Issoufou with the task of leading us to make sure that the AfCFTA does indeed become a reality in our lifetime. So I want to thank you very much, and I know that President Issoufou is ready to share with you his vision for the next few years in the implementation of the AfCFTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you very much. A round of applause, please, for the Secretary General of the AfCFTA, Wamkele Mene. I would encourage you, when you're here in Ghana, to visit him and his colleagues at the AfCFTA Secretariat, which is just around the corner. It's a few minutes' drive from here. When you get there, make sure that in the forecourt you find a statue. You'll see a statue, only one statue. And this honors a man they call the AfCFTA champion, a man whose leadership helped birth the biggest free trade area in the world. Please welcome to give the keynote address on the theme Turbocharging the Implementation of the AfCFTA, the former President of Niger, His Excellency Mahamadou Issoufou.
Excellences, Messieurs les anciens présidents de la République, Messieurs les anciens premiers ministres, Excellences, Professeur Orama, Monsieur Wamkele, Secrétaire général de la ZLECAf, Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis ravi de m'adresser à vous à l'occasion de cette cérémonie du conseil d'administration de la Banque africaine AfCFTA et à l'occasion de ce 30e anniversaire de la création d'AfCFTA ici à Accra, au Ghana. Permettez-moi de saluer et d'apprécier le leadership de mon cher frère Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, président de la République du Ghana. Je voudrais également saluer le professeur Orama pour sa direction, pour l'excellent travail qu'il mène à la tête de notre banque, cette précieuse institution panafricaine de financement du commerce. Tâche extrêmement difficile, surtout quand on sait que le déficit annuel de financement du commerce en Afrique s'élève à quelques 81 milliards de dollars. Je salue également le secrétaire général de la ZLECAf, le dynamique Wamkele Mene. Mesdames et messieurs, alors que notre continent ne s'est pas encore totalement remis des répercussions socio-économiques de la COVID-19, le conflit russo-ukrainien représente une autre menace pour l'Afrique qui dépend fortement des importations alimentaires et des engrais à partir de deux pays. Ce conflit qui a perturbé nos chaînes d'approvisionnement peut être aussi une opportunité. Oui, il peut être une chance de réduire notre dépendance aux importations alimentaires en provenance de l'extérieur du continent. Notre ambition doit être d'assurer notre souveraineté alimentaire. La mise en œuvre du plan du développement agricole de l'Afrique et l'accélération de la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine constituent deux leviers qui peuvent nous y aider et nous permettre de transformer cette crise en opportunité. Dans ce cadre, et en réponse directe aux effets économiques néfastes de la crise ukrainienne, AfCFTA avait approuvé au 31 décembre 2022 des demandes de financement d'environ 8 milliards de dollars. Il s'agit de soutenir l'importation de fournitures essentielles telles que le pétrole, le gaz, les engrais, les céréales et autres intrants agricoles. En outre, le programme a aidé les États membres à respecter leurs obligations de paiement commerciaux arrivant à échéance. Cette intervention s'explique par la nécessité de faire face à l'urgence. Mais notre ambition est de promouvoir des substitutions aux importations. Notre ambition est de produire et promouvoir le commerce intra-africain afin de contribuer à réaliser l'Afrique que nous voulons. Mesdames et messieurs, réaliser l'ambition, construire la prospérité pour les Africains, thème de la présente rencontre, est en cohérence avec le thème de l'année choisi par l'Union africaine qui est accélérer la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. Partenaire stratégique du processus de la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, AfCFTA est un acteur clé de cette accélération. Comme on le sait, dans la droite ligne des décisions des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine, la Banque a développé depuis sa création, il y a 30 ans, plusieurs programmes et outils pour appuyer et favoriser l'intégration des économies africaines et renforcer ainsi leur résilience. Ainsi, AfCFTA a activement soutenu le secrétariat de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, initialement par le biais d'une subvention de 3 millions de dollars pour les 3 premières années de ces opérations se terminant en 2022. Ce montant a été doublé à 6 millions de dollars pour les 3 prochaines années, jusqu'en 2025. Ces subventions ont été utilisées pour soutenir les négociations, l'engagement du secteur privé et le plaidoyer sur la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. Constitue la base sur laquelle émergeront les monnaies africaines fortes et convertibles demain. Pour booster le commerce, les communautés africaines des affaires ont besoin de plateformes, de rencontres et d'échanges. Je tiens à saluer la création et la tenue de la foire commerciale intra-africaine qui a déjà connu 2 éditions, et celle du Forum d'affaires de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, dont la première édition s'est tenue les 28 et 29 avril dernier au Cap en Afrique du Sud. Les éditions de toutes ces plateformes ont connu un franc succès. Au regard des résultats enregistrés, de la détermination des parties prenantes, notamment le secrétariat de la ZLECAf et AfCFTA, du ferme engagement à tous les niveaux, nous pouvons conclure que nous sommes sur la bonne voie. Mesdames et messieurs, dans mon rapport au chef d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine lors de la session extraordinaire du 25 novembre 2022, j'ai insisté sur l'urgence de travailler dans le sens de l'amélioration de la performance et de la fluidité des corridors existants, de la création de corridors maritimes et de la transformation des routes, notamment transsahariennes, en véritables corridors de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine afin d'assurer la connexion entre l'Afrique du Nord et l'Afrique au sud du Sahara. Les voies de communication sont nécessaires pour assurer la libre circulation des personnes et des marchandises ainsi que des services. À l'heure où presque partout dans le monde, la distance n'est plus un obstacle à la fluidité des échanges, l'Afrique demeure le seul continent où, par manque d'infrastructures, les échanges commerciaux sont extrêmement faibles. À cette occasion, j'avais recommandé aux chefs d'État et de gouvernement la tenue d'un sommet extraordinaire sur le développement des infrastructures en Afrique. Infrastructures routières, ferroviaires, énergétiques, numériques, aéroportuaires et portuaires. Ces infrastructures constituent des instruments décisifs d'accélération de la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, des instruments qui permettront de réaliser la vision et de construire la prospérité du continent. Leur financement, comme le financement du développement en général, nécessitera des réformes profondes, notamment celle de l'architecture financière internationale. Je suis sûr qu'AfCFTA contribuera à cette réflexion. Je l'y encourage. Je la félicite pour le travail déjà abattu, comme je félicite le secrétaire général de la ZLECAf pour ses efforts soutenus en vue de l'opérationnalisation de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, la zone d'échange, comme cela a été dit, la plus vaste du monde. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Another round of applause, please, for His Excellency, the former President of Niger and the AfCFTA champion, Mamadou Issoufou, His Excellency. The AfCFTA, to be realized, is going to take bold action. It's going to take ambition. A man that really embodies the entrepreneurial zeal and the possibility within the business world that is sort of embedded within the AfCFTA is a man you all know, and is the first person I think that comes to mind, the chairman of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, and he's here with us today. If I could just ask him to rise. Aliko Dangote. Now, Your Excellency, thank you for setting the scene, really, for the first discussion of this AGM. Now, the African Union has designated 2023 as the year of the acceleration of AfCFTA implementation. And this session is called Turbocharging Implementation of the AfCFTA. We've got a great panel, and we also have a great moderator who will introduce them. Please welcome to the stage the Editor-in-Chief of CNBC Africa, Godfrey Mutizwa.
Good morning, or should I say good afternoon. So I'm still stuck on whether I'm still on my Johannesburg time or I should transition to Accra time. I'm trying. So I'll say both good morning and good afternoon. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time, for your attention, for your presence here. At CNBC Africa, we tell African stories, and this is one of the great stories of our time. There's no question about that. For those of you who are impatient with the implementation of Africa's historic African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, let me remind you, it's been about 2.5 years. That's 900.5 days to the end of the month. May I ask you to contrast that with the European Union and their Unity Project, or the North American Free Trade Area, or should we talk about ASEAN? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a baby. But the good news is that our baby isn't a complacent baby. Our baby is an extremely active baby. And on top of that, we're going to turbocharge our baby. Welcome to the first plenary session of the 2023 AfCFTA annual meetings, which is a special gathering this year, because this baby is also 30 years old. It is a happy hearty anniversary and a special thanks to the forefathers. I think it was October 1993 in Abuja that they set their foresight, foretold that as Africans we needed to have our own goods, sit on our shelves, and to feed ourselves and nourish our people. And for that, we needed AfCFTA. And it also gives me great pleasure to say, President Obasanjo, we salute you for your vision, for your foresight. Allow me to introduce our panel for our discussion today. May I call upon His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mining, the African Union. Ms. Flori Liza, President and CEO of Corporate Council on Africa. Dr. Asmani Asfour, President, African Business Council. And last but not least, Otunbani Adebayo, former Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment from Nigeria. Before we start, we're going to introduce to you a speech by Pamela Cook-Hamilton, Executive Director, the International Trade Center. Please listen in.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency Professor Orama, let me start by expressing my heartfelt appreciation to you for extending this gracious invitation and for the long-standing close partnership that has flourished between our two organizations. It's an honor to address this esteemed gathering at the AfCFTA annual general meetings. Let me take a moment to congratulate the bank for the 30 years dedication to Africa's regional integration process and to acknowledge the remarkable work that AfCFTA has done in undertaking to support the growing African business sector. This commitment to private sector development and particularly to enterprise competitiveness is a shared value between our organizations, and we recognize the immense importance of empowering and enabling these enterprises, particularly the MSMEs, to thrive in the global marketplace. Under your visionary leadership, Mr. President, AfCFTA has become a beacon of hope and support for businesses and the entire private sector across Africa, specifically now under the AfCFTA. Since assuming office, you have brought about significant change and progress, particularly in fostering closer ties between Africa and the Caribbean, my home region. The first ever Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in Barbados in September 2022 was a remarkable success in building bridges and opening doors, and ITC is proud to have been a partner in this journey. This effort has strengthened regional integration, created new opportunities, and kick-started a new promising era of economic cooperation between these regions. You continue to have ITC's full support to transform African-Caribbean trade and investment for shared prosperity. ITC is also partnering with AfCFTA through a corporate initiative to empower and enable MSMEs under the AfCFTA called One Trade Africa. A key achievement of our joint actions has been the development of capacity building programs that have proven instrumental in equipping African businesses with the necessary skills and knowledge to thrive in international trade. Let me highlight our joint How to Export with the AfCFTA training program, which has empowered over 6,000 MSMEs through our free online curriculum. These MSMEs form the backbone of economies in Africa and must be supported to take advantage of new market opportunities offered by the AfCFTA. Together, we have also partnered with business support organizations in 15 countries to deliver deep dive national AfCFTA training workshops tailored to the national context. Our institutions have collaborated at the policy level to support South Sudan's national export and investment strategy, a 5-year plan with 9 priority sectors. This strategy aims to boost trade and investment through strategic planning, government support, and private sector leadership. In the African Union Year of AfCFTA Acceleration, we look forward to advancing our private sector-driven cooperation to support businesses and MSMEs to participate in transformation of intra-African trade. Let me take this opportunity to applaud AfCFTA's vision and foresight in convening the flagship intra-African trade fairs. These fairs have created the largest single marketplace in Africa, connecting thousands of businesses and MSMEs. ITC is fully committed to making the third edition of the IATF in Cairo a success. We have already started to train, mentor, and coach small businesses from across the continent to be ready to pitch trade and do businesses at trade fair. Together in Cairo, we will also convene a dedicated MSME masterclass on how to export and invest under the AfCFTA. This year, I also look forward to launching the first ever Pan-African Fashion Designers Cooperative with you at the Creative Africa Nexus Summit. This important initiative will provide designers in Africa with resources, services, and a collective voice to help each other and the industry. Critically, we look forward to working with the bank on the development of priority continental value chains, such as automotives, pharmaceuticals, and cotton textile. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, let me reiterate my deepest appreciation to Your Excellency Professor Rama for his exceptional leadership, and to the entire AfCFTA senior management teams. The International Trade Center remains committed to our partnership with AfCFTA, working hand in hand to achieve our shared goals of promoting economic growth, fostering regional integration, and creating opportunities for all. I wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pamela Cook-Hamilton, Executive Director, International Trade Center. I think we should call her an African champion, there's no question about it, on the work that she's doing around the continent and ensuring that we carry this vision forward. I wanted at the outset to spell out what is expected out of this session, so that at the end, if we have not done our job, I will not be paid. I promise you that. This session is expected to reflect on the slow progress that we have seen in trying to drive forward the AfCFTA from that momentous moment on January 1, 2021. We are supposed to learn and reflect on the key lessons that have come through the past 2.5 years and what we can do about it as a result of those lessons. Remember to reiterate the importance of the AfCFTA in ensuring that we diversify African economies and we see the economic integration of Africa. And lastly, but not least, we want to explore the importance of strengthening public-private partnerships. Or put simply, we want to explore options and ensuring that the private sector is driving this process, and it is happening on the African continent. So I'm going to begin by talking politics with Commissioner Muchanga. Commissioner, when you and your colleagues sat and gave us the vision and you gave us the platform to act, I want to know if we have achieved the milestones, the targets that you set out at the beginning to where we are today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I answer that question, let me join the earlier speakers in congratulating very warmly the African Export-Import Bank for attaining 30 years, 30 progressive years of existence with very substantial delivery to the development of Africa. I say so also with a personal note of satisfaction. In March 2018, assisted by my then principal advisor, Babajide Sodipo, I opened the doors for the African Continental Free Trade Area, rather, for the African Export-Import Bank to enter the policy organs of the African Union system. And since then, they are part of us, as seen by the flag here. Now, this is something which really needs to be looked at in terms of the issues emerging. The theme for this year is accelerated implementation of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the theme now is turbocharging implementation of the agreement. And one of your opening statements was that there has been slow progress. And the earlier director of ceremony indicated that there is need for boldness and high ambition. And maybe I can add that visible results. Now, if you talk to some people, they give a qualification. If the African Continental Free Trade Area succeeds, the key word there is if, which suggests that in their minds, they are not very, very, very sure. And again, if you take survey results from the African Export-Import Bank, the International Trade Center, the Economic Commission for Africa, who are here, the message that comes out, and this is a survey of the African private sector's knowledge of the African Continental Free Trade Area. You take all these three survey results, and they've been doing that since 2021. Less than 50% of the African private sector understand the African Continental Free Trade Area. The next stage is that, as we are talking now, it's very, very, very difficult for one to say, these are the results, statistical results, of the contribution of the African Continental Free Trade Area to the growth of intra-African trade. So against that background, I would go with those who say, yes, maybe we need to give more energy to the process of implementation. And I'll come back to that later in the discussion so that I don't monopolize the floor. The issue of the role of the Council of Ministers, leadership, there's a role for them to play to ensure that it's turbocharged. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. If you were to reflect just a little bit on some of those key holdups in terms of achieving the targets that you wanted, what would you identify those are? I don't know. I can just maybe give us a couple.
Okay, now to give that a context, the former president of Niger is sitting right in front of me. The heads of state and government, when they rolled out the roadmap for the negotiation of the agreement establishing, that time it was called the Continental Free Trade Area, we did not add the term African. They gave a deadline of December 2017. And when we met in Niger in December 2017, the chief negotiators were saying we cannot conclude the agreement. We still need some more time. And I said, I cannot go beyond the deadline issued by the heads of state and government. And the two, if I allow that, is going to reduce momentum. So I went to His Excellency the President and said, Your Excellency, this is the state of affairs. My recommendation is that when you address the ministers, African ministers of trade, you inform them very directly that you want them to sit on their own as ministers and look at all the brackets which are outstanding. And before they leave Niger, they should come and give you a concrete result. And that meeting should be restricted to only delegations with ministers. His Excellency accepted that recommendation. And we got a room, and my then principal advisor, Babajide Sodipo, was the gate man. He ensured that only ministers attended that meeting, plus the chairperson of the chief negotiators. Within 3 hours, all the brackets were removed. They were all removed. We went to the plenary, and I expected some sort of war to emerge. And indeed, there was a war. Some of the delegations were saying, what you did is to undermine the principle of sovereign equality of states. Others were pointing fingers at me. We are going to report you to our ministers. And I replied, I said, this principle of sovereign equality of states should be measured. There is also a sovereign obligation to exercise that principle of sovereign equality. Each member state is obliged to bring delegates of equal rank to the meetings that are taking place. If it's a ministerial meeting, there should be ministers. Chief negotiators, there should be chief negotiators. Seminar for experts. There are some delegations which come. They start as senior experts, they are chief negotiators, they are ministers. That is not an obligation of sovereign equality. And for those of you who want to report me, feel free. And they did. And some of the ministers said, when we met them on the 12th ministerial meeting of the WTO in Argentina, my brother, my chief negotiator, came to report on what happened in Niger. And I told him, what the commissioner did is right. If I was in his shoes, I would do exactly the same. Because we have an historic obligation to conclude the negotiations.
Sure.
And others, because these are things we need to know. Others said, Commissioner, you write a letter to the chairperson, to the champion, saying what was agreed in Niger is null and void. I said, no. I do not report to one member state. I report to the collective whole. And at the end of the day, all those who are resisting accepted. And 18th March, we signed the agreement. So if now you see a situation where there is resistance, you need to use political instinct and say, politically, how do we move out of this logjam?
Yeah.
Logjam. If you don't do that, you stop.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Commissioner, for those insights. And I'm wondering, as I sit here, if one of those ministers who was in this cauldron is sitting here beside us.
From Nigeria, there was a lady minister. From Ghana, Minister Alan. From South Africa, I don't know if he's from here, Minister Patel. I don't know if they are here.
Thank you. Thank you. So it gives me an opportunity to come to former Minister Adebayo and ask the question. I think the Commissioner has been very frank. I think one of the things that we have said about the AfCFTA has been the political commitment, which has been absolutely unwavering. But I think inside, we see that inside that political commitment, there are also very key things that are considered by the technical people that they have to deal with. I want the insight of the former Minister of Trade from Nigeria to weigh in, number one, on those things that have held us, and perhaps you can pick up on a few things that the Commissioner has said. We have a few minutes, so I'll hurry you up a little bit.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think one of the problems that we have had is the fact that each country has wanted to project their own interest over and beyond the collective interest. We find that when we meet, each of our colleagues always pushing the individual interest of their country. The Secretary General has had a very, very difficult time putting us all in line, because whenever we meet, like I said, individual interests come to the fore. For instance, we do recognize that this is an agreement, this is something that has to work for the benefit of all Nigerians. But I think, luckily I'm no longer an official minister, so I think I can speak a bit freely without getting into trouble. I think the major problem that we have had is the individual interest that we have been projecting for our countries. For instance, when we were talking about automotive, for example, we looked at it, and every country in Africa wants to assemble motor vehicles.
Yep.
Every country cannot assemble motor vehicles. So we try to sit down and look at a way by which we say, let us decide that, say, 4 or 5 countries will do the assembling of motor vehicles. We will look at other countries and they will do the components that will go into the motor vehicles as a way of compensating them so that they add value to what is being done. But even at that, to arrive at the number of countries, and those countries that will be the ones to produce the motor vehicles, is a problem, because every country is insistent that they are the ones that want to do that thing. So we have a major problem in that regard. I think going forward, a lot of work has to be done by the heads of state, and that because the original initiative is from the heads of state, they have looked at it. It is a dream that they have, that we should have a single African market, such that there's inter-trade between all the countries in Africa. So I believe that they should impress it more on the officials to look at the bigger picture as opposed to the smaller picture. Like I said, we have countries trying to protect their own turf. Yes. We have regional bodies, the ECOWASs, the different regional bodies as well. And, you know, these are all areas that have interest that are ingrained. So I think we have to get our mindset out of what we are used to and look at the bigger picture and see how we can actually make
so we need to turbocharge the politics again, like we did at the beginning.
Indeed, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Dr. Asfo, I'm coming to you as a close, keen observer of the process that the politicians have been driving. And I have to recognize that in this instance, they have been far, far faster, I think in many cases, than business. But you have a closer view than me. Your observations.
So thank you very much. Let me first congratulate AfCFTA for 30 years of very, very, very strong support to the private sector, actually. So as Africa Business Council, established by the Heads of State Decision Summit to be the voice of the African private sector, our competitive founding vision is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, investment, and industrialization. And our membership includes all the RECs, business councils, chambers of commerce, private sector federations, union of industries, manufacturing associations, big corporates, SMEs, women entrepreneurs, and youth entrepreneurs. So our take for the AfCFTA, Africa Content Free Trade Area is really our flagship for Africa's prosperity. That's why we really envisage it. But how can we do it, and how can we reach there? Yeah. For the private sector, we see that our strategy is embedded in 3 pillars, 3 Ps. Private sector empowerment, policy advocacy, and product developments. When we're talking about policy advocacy, we need the governments to have incentives for the African private sector. When my investors, the African private sector, want to invest in a project, they would need really preferential treatment. They would need incentives. They would need enabling environment for the investment within the African continent. His Excellency, the champion of AfCFTA, in Niger, there is a lot of cattle, while there is no dairy products manufacturing. Milk is still imported from France. We need to see, if I bring the investors within Niger to invest, what are the enabling environment? How we can make incentives for our African investors. On another note, if we talk about healthcare industry, you know that in Africa, 80% are dying from cancer compared to 24% from the Western world, because there is no investment in healthcare industry, in early diagnosis and treatment for cancer. My sister Nardos here is working very hard for the implementation of Africa leaders for health. The investors can go and invest, but what is the take from the politicians?
Yeah.
How can the public-private sector succeed?
Yeah.
And what is the governments really doing for preferring our African private sector? One of the advocacy pillars also we are working on is to have at least 40% of all government procurement goes to African private sector. I cannot imagine that right now we are importing $50 billion per year food from outside the continent, while we have 60% arable land in Africa. In order to invest, we need the private sector.
Absolutely, and in the process we are weakening our exchange rates because that $50 billion is in foreign exchange, another subject that we need to talk about. But very quickly, 2 points. One, the commissioner referred to a survey, and it's pointing a finger at you. I want your answer to that. Why? How is it possible that the very people who are intended to benefit from the AfCFTA do not know about the AfCFTA? And then secondly, are you pointing a finger at the politicians and saying, yes, you have talked, you have put the policy framework, but you have not done the practical work that enables us to create African goods and trade amongst ourselves?
So thank you very much, because with my first pillar about private sector empowerment, sensitization about AfCFTA is very important. Private sector is not homogeneous. We have the big corporates, and we have the SMEs, we have the women entrepreneurs, even we have the rural women across the whole Africa that are trying to sell their own vegetables and friends, and now they don't know about AfCFTA. The cross-border women traders, they don't know about AfCFTA. We have done several actually training programs, and that's when our strategic plan to do training programs and sensitization for the private sector to know about AfCFTA, but know also about the investment opportunities. So we have making now a mapping exercise, what's existing on the continent and how we can trade among ourselves. Like for instance, pharmaceuticals. In Egypt, there is 165 pharmaceutical industry, but still we are importing from India and China. There is 400 manufacturers of medical consumables and supplies, and still importing from India and China. It is very important with reference to awareness, information, private sector. And for the third pillar is about product development. If we talk about trade, what are we going to trade among ourselves? Containers from China or made in Africa product that is quality, value added, standardized, harmonized, and quality.
Sure. So I was hoping that I'd given you an opportunity to talk about the many interviews I've done with you, trying to get the word out about the world, and you mentioning nothing. So I'll remember that in our next conversation. Flori, I made you listen to all of this because your members, the companies that you represent, have got the goods. And you hearing this story, I am wondering if you encountered a situation where you were ready, but you found the frameworks, the platforms for you to be able to get your members to bring in goods to trade on the continent are not as developed as you had hoped after annunciation of the arrival of the AfCFTA.
Well, thank you, and Excellencies, Dr. Arama, it's a pleasure to be here, an honor to be here on behalf of Corporate Council on Africa. The question you ask, I first have to make sure people understand that CCA is composed of both U.S. and African companies, multinationals, as well as SMEs. And I think that because of the unique bringing together of the private sector, both U.S. and African, with African governments, as well as with the U.S. government, CCA has been a long-time proponent of the AfCFTA and of the vision that the leaders of Africa have put in place for putting together what is now going to be one of the largest free trade markets and areas in the world, 1.3 billion people, I think $3.4 trillion economy. And Africa is at a point now where our members, both US and African, but especially the American companies, are asking, what does it mean? How can we take advantage of it? And the message that we are sending is that the AfCFTA it has moved fast and far, and that we really need to applaud the Africans for what they're doing. In terms of the opportunities, obviously, intra-African trade, which I think still stands at about 18%, there are so many ways that Africans, the people, the workers, the companies, can all benefit from AfCFTA. But while you're thinking about the implementation and how it can benefit African companies and African people, we hope that you will also look at how your partners outside of Africa can also come and work with you in a complementary way. So just as an example, American companies for many years, US companies are in Africa. People say, where are the American companies? They're here. Many have been here for 40, 50, 60 years and more. But they have had to engage with Africans sort of one country at a time.
Sure.
Yes, and so they're looking for how, under the AfCFTA, they can now have a continental strategy or even a regional strategy and pull the Africans into some of the global value chains, whether it's automobiles or pharmaceuticals. There's just so many opportunities there. So we hope that there'll be more of a chance. I'm looking at my brother Wamkele as they are implementing the current protocols and getting ready to announce some new protocols like the digital trade protocol, that there'll be a chance for your partners outside of Africa to also weigh in and provide some insights on how they would like to work with you, work with the Africans, and take advantage of what's happening here on the continent. There's no continent that has more opportunities now, especially in the post-COVID period, than Africa. And there's no issue that has to be addressed in the world, whether it's climate or food security, name it. There's no continent that is more important than Africa. So this is why I think this is a great time to be looking at AfCFTA, to be looking at the African continent.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm taking your statement, and I'm taking your statement, Africa is a country for me. I know that's a controversial statement for some people, but Africa is a country for me. Before I leave you, so we move on to the next point that I want us to discuss very quickly, is the key lessons of the past 2.5 years. Working with your members, if you were to pass on a message about how we can accelerate the implementation of the AfCFTA, maybe just an idea or a couple of ideas.
Well, you know, the thing is that in every key sector that is important for Africa's economic growth, whether it's in the health sector or in ICT and digital, agribusiness, manufacturing, in every one of those areas, there are so many opportunities. And I think that, you know, your partners are ready to step in and work with you. Dr. Asfor mentioned that Africa has 60% of the world's arable land, yet and still it is importing food. U.S. companies, farmers, and people in the agribusiness sector in the U.S. have some of the technologies and are looking for the kinds of partnerships that they can have in Africa. Obviously, agriculture, agribusiness, food security is a key area. But really, you know, any area you look at, I want to mention one. I remember pre-COVID, people were talking about trying to produce more vaccines here on the continent.
Yes.
And, you know, it was dismissed, to be frank. People were like, there's no way that you're going to be able to produce mRNA vaccines, the most advanced type of vaccines here. But what I'll note is that in the period where the supply chains broke down and where people were looking for new partners and building resiliency into their own supply chains, Africa is the place where they said, okay, now we can partner with companies here on the continent to produce vaccines. And I believe this is happening across many value chains. But I just use that one because 5 years ago, people would have said no way. But today, people are very much focused on that and know that Africa is the place that can happen.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of work that's happening in South Africa, in Rwanda, as well as here in the West as well.
Yes, Senegal also.
Absolutely. Commissioner, I'm going to make you listen to some more lessons learned. Dr. Asfor, your key lessons that you've picked up in the last 2 years that if you gave to the Commissioner, hopefully he'll be able to implement very quickly and get some things moving.
So thank you very much. First, thanks very much for all the stakeholders and for AfCFTA, my brother Wamakili, my brother AU Commissioner, my brother Orama, who is really, my key issue is working all of us together because the private sector cannot work alone. And all the political arena, they cannot do or implement anything with the private sector. Thanks to President Orama, every time we ask him to support the private sector, he is there for us. Even within our strategic plan for sensitization workshops for the AfCFTA, he is ready to support. The whole issue is that when my brother Wamakili Mini puts the whole engagement strategy of private sector is great, we are all going to work together. That's the whole issue. There is a lot of protocols. Thank you very much for the women and women and youth, for the intellectual property, for the digital trade. All this cannot be done except with all our involvement as the real private sector. And here really, the private sector, as I mentioned, is homogeneous. So we need to empower all our private sector, SMEs, women, youth, for the Africa we want. The Africa we want is a prosperous Africa. It's not about alleviation of poverty. It's not about ending hunger. It's about really prosperous Africa. It's about well-nourished Africa. It's about well-educated Africa. Not like I always say, we want to end hunger. We want to have no illiteracy, no hunger, no poverty. No, why? The private sector is here for you. Not no poverty, wealthy Africa. Not no hunger, but well-nourished. Not illiteracy, but well-educated. This is the Africa we want. My sister, the woman icon, Dr. Dlamini Zuma, under her leadership in African Union, we started the Africa we want, Africa 23 Development Agenda. We want to progress by our real integration. All of us come together, all of us have a role to play, and that's how we go together.
Sounds to me like you are happy, so I'm going to leave you there. But I want to give the former minister an opportunity, since he is now sort of sitting outside the circle a little bit and can speak freely. Just key things that we've picked up over the past 2.5 years that we can take forward and ensure that we are able to turbocharge apart from the politics.
Like I pointed out earlier, thank you very much. Like I pointed out earlier, I think the heads of state should get together and impress it upon their officials, upon their ministers, that we are looking at one Africa, not individual countries. One thing I've noticed, the Western world, the foreign countries outside of Africa, they are looking out for their interests, and they tend to come at each and every one of us individually, trying to give us advantages to take our minds away from what we're trying to do as Africa. We should resist these temptations. We should trade amongst ourselves. Let me give an example. Nigeria, that I come from, we are a net exporter of cement now, thanks to the policies put in place by President Obasanjo when he was president of Nigeria. Nigeria is a net exporter of cement now from being a net importer in the past. Other African countries, rather than buy cement from Nigeria, buy from Europe or buy from outside of Africa. And this goes for a lot of the products produced within Africa. So that's what you were pointing out.
Yes,
so
my brother, whatever on the African soil cannot be brought from outside the continent. That's what we want.
We should, amongst ourselves, increase the level of trade within Africa.
Yeah, I hear you, and I can tell you I've got a practical example. I remember there was a Ugandan trade delegation that was in South Africa, and we were talking with one young man who had brought his coffee, and I was asking him, how can I get this coffee? He says, I'm so sorry, my brother, I can't give it to you because the coffee you're drinking, most of the coffee you're drinking in South Africa comes from Europe. After European middlemen, that's when it finds itself to Southern Africa. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Commissioner, I've run out of time, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to wrap up, and I'm asking you specifically the issue around collaborating with the private sector, whether we have created strong enough platforms for us to be able to get the most that we can. out of the engines of growth, that is the private sector?
I think I'll begin by saying that there has been a demonstration that Africa is a safe destination for investment. During the opening part, Mark Edo saluted Aliko Dangote. He committed $19 billion to invest in a factory, which means that he has confidence in Africa. So what I would like the private sector, African private sector, is that they should have greater confidence in Africa. There's work to be done here and there, but they cannot withhold anymore. They should invest. Money is not a problem. Last night I was scrolling on the wealth status of Africa, and the figures that came up is that Africa currently has 23 billionaires and about 328 central millionaires, those $100 million and above. So the money is there. It's the willingness that is not there. Come out of hiding, invest in Africa, invest in Africa, invest in Africa, and Africa will prosper.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please help me in thanking our panel for an insightful conversation. Final comment from me is that perhaps let's have those very frank conversations about what needs to be done in order to change what we need to be done. And I think I'll take your last point, which is that no African product should go outside Africa and then come back into Africa, i.e. leaving African capital abroad. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your silence. Thank you for your insight. Mark?
Thank you, my brother. Maybe we can have a photo.
There's a photo.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And another warm round of applause, but not just the panelists, but the moderator. Thank you. Thank you, Godfrey. I want to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency Josefa Sako, AU Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, who's joining us from the AU in Addis. Very welcome. Now I've got a little bit of a treat for you. We've moved the schedule around a little bit, and you'll be pleased to hear about this. Now, last month, Africa's largest oil refinery was opened in Nigeria, in the Lekki Peninsula, if any of you have ever been there. This $20 billion Dangote refinery will not just meet the country's petroleum needs, but it will also offer export surplus to the rest of the continent and beyond. Now, tomorrow, the chairman of Dangote Group will meet Nigeria's new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I understand from media reports that he's taking a familiar friend along in the guise of Bill Gates. That's tomorrow. Today, he's here with you. Please welcome Aliko Dangote. This is an unexpected treat for me because I wasn't the one supposed to be interviewing you, but God is kind and I get my opportunity to sit with you again.
I'm always scared of facing you. But
You're always scared. You don't have to be. We've been friends for a long time. This is a happy occasion, 30th anniversary of AfCFTA. Now, as I understand it, AfCFTA was the biggest financier, or at least I think, of the refinery, or certainly one of the biggest. Just in a sort of sum up, what role AfCFTA has played in your story?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to first of all thank President Orama and all the board members for inviting me to come, even though unfortunately I have to rush to Niger because Bill Gates is arriving there this evening, and so there was a mix-up in my listen. But I think AfCFTA is the most foremost multilateral institution in Africa. And I can tell you, without AfCFTA, there is no way entrepreneurs like us will even grow at all.
Wow. That is a fantastic validation.
AfCFTA actually, they did more than enough. I even said it during my speech. First of all, they believe in what we are doing. That's number one. Number two, they do understand the business. Number three, they know that, yes, it is a must for us to have a refinery in Nigeria or anywhere in Africa, because as we speak today, out of 55 countries in Africa, only 2 countries are not importing fuel.
Wow.
Yes, Algeria, Libya. But the rest are all dependent on traders. But AfCFTA, any time when we had an issue, there was an issue during COVID. Any time when there is an issue, they come up with a big check. I'm not talking about small check, big check. So really, I must thank President Orama, the board members, the entire management of AfCFTA, because without AfCFTA, actually our dream wouldn't have been, our vision wouldn't have actually come to fruition. So they did a lot. They gave us a lot of advice. When we had issues during COVID, because everything stopped, Orama himself met with me severally to advise which way forward. And, both himself, the team members, Anil and co, they really, really helped. But it's not only even about our refinery. I can tell you the only bank that normally will put its check on the table if you now go either yes or no. And they're very passionate about actually, building or industrializing Africa. You won't get any money from most institutions. It will take you years to just go on discussing. I know the way business runs is that whatever is good today might not be good tomorrow. So if there is that delay, at the time that they want to give you the money, you might not need the money at all. But with AfCFTA, I think most of our transactions, they don't last more than 3 months.
So they're fast turnarounds.
Fast and prompt. So the relationship has actually been very, very, very good. And I want to personally, thank the president and chairman, the board members for assisting a lot of entrepreneurs like myself in Africa to make sure that they make our dreams come true. Like what I said, I have quite a lot to do, but I feel that, look, without coming here, I'm not going to show my appreciation. So really, AfCFTA, a very big congratulations, and I want to encourage you to keep, doing what you are doing, because really, we are a dumping ground in Africa. And what I keep saying, because we have not really industrialized, we're only exporting, raw materials. So what is happening is that people are actually importing, what's going on is that we're importing poverty and exporting jobs
wealth,
out.
Yes. So it's a mathematical equation that will never make us poor.
We'll never make it, yes. We're saying that, yes, we are going to grow. You take a country like Nigeria, we're saying that, yes, by 2050, Nigeria will be number 3 in terms of population in the world.
Yeah, young people, yeah.
Young people. But then, how many things are we producing? There are not really many things. And this thing is not really very difficult. I can give you a story, for example, like our cement. Okay? If not because, I know that, yes, President Obasanjo was the one that actually mobilized and, have the creation of this, AfCFTA himself and the former president of ADB in DI. And they said that, look, we must have our own. So, Mr. President Obasanjo, I must thank you for having that vision of creating AfCFTA. And, leaders like Obasanjo, President Obasanjo, is that they always look beyond things, and say, okay, fine. Because, for example, President Obasanjo, as at 2002, the entire cement production in Nigeria was less than 2 million tons. And Obasanjo called me that, look, what do we do? How can we, because we cannot allow you guys to just keep importing cement. And I said, Mr. President, okay, maybe I should remove my own personal cap and put Nigeria's cap so I can advise you better. And he called me very early in the morning. I had to fly from Lagos to Abuja. So we now sat down and he took some of my advice, and now he went and created something which made it now possible for Nigeria within a period of 10 years, not only to be self-sufficient, no, a major exporter of cement out.
Wow. Now you're talking about vision. Cement, salts, sugar, petrochemicals, flowers. It seems like you've almost built everything that needs to be built. The question is, what mountain is left to climb for Aliko Dangote? You're 65 years old. You still have quite a bit to go.
Yes, our own is not really keep building or keep making money. Our own is that we're actually the face setters. If we keep investing in Africa, believing in our own this, because there's nobody, Americans will not come, or Japanese or whatever, to come and develop our own economy. So we have to do it. So our major job is that we are the drivers, whether good or bad. And if you look at most of the 14 African countries where we are, where they have limestone, we went and debottleneck their cement issues. Let me give you an example. When we went to Zambia, we couldn't even have cement to build a factory. It was very difficult. We went to Ethiopia. I mean, today, if we shut down our factory in Ethiopia, they will run into trouble because the foreigners have no interest in increasing the capacity. They have interest in making more money on a smaller supply.
Yeah.
So really, not only me, other Africans, we must get together, we must assist each other, we must go to banks like AfCFTA and show them what we have so that we can fully industrialize Africa and make sure the AfCFTA works.
That was my next question, actually. We have the Secretary General of the AfCFTA who gave a lovely opening gambit about progress so far and his vision for the future. Where are you now in terms of your vision or view of the AfCFTA now after just opening the biggest oil and gas refinery in Africa? What's your view?
I think my view is that we must make sure AfCFTA works. And if you look at it, that is the main reason why most of what we have set up in the last 4 or 5 years, with the assistance of, consortium of banks, AFD, African Development Bank, other local commercial bank, and also some other institutions. We now have 3 million tons of urea. And sometimes when I hear African countries looking for fertilizer, I say, but we have a lot. Nigeria produces 6 million tons. And we did all this within the period of 5 years, both ourselves and Indorama. So there's actually enough if it's urea. That's number one. Number two, other countries that they don't have gas or whatever, then they have urea, which we can now freely trade between us. Okay? And then now you have the petroleum product. Petroleum product, we are going to produce, we are going to use 650,000 barrels per day, which is a lot. So it can satisfy the entire, West Africa and some of the Central African countries like Angola and Co. It's a very huge capacity. We have 900,000 tons of polypropylene, and we're doing more of plastics. So this will actually help in terms of, free trade. I remember one time, they organized some, a seminar trying to, at that time, people believe that, yes, we as Dangote, we are not interested in, AfCFTA. I said that, no, we are very, very interested.
It wasn't my seminar.
No.
Okay.
Yes, it wasn't. So what I keep saying is that, yes, AfCFTA is the greatest idea. It will help to grow all our economies. It will create massive amount of jobs. Most of these youth that we have that are littering around, they will be able to have jobs. But we have to cooperate. We have to make sure that, yeah, things move. I don't want to now be in a position where I used to be, because right now I have the African passport. But the African Union passport allows you to move around, even though there are about 2-3 countries that are not allowing, they are not agreeing up to now. I don't know why. But you see, if I have to get a visa to get into country A as an African, and now we go with a British guy or maybe a Nigerian, it has happened to me, a Nigerian holding British passport, he was allowed in, and we're arguing, debating about my visa. And I'm the one, and I'm the one with the money.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Can you imagine?
So I think what maybe African countries they need to do is that, why don't you give Africans visa on arrival? That will facilitate trade.
Yes.
If you are making life difficult for me, there's no way I'll go and invest.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, without mentioning a name, when we're building factories all over, we invested about $620 million in South Africa, actually the biggest African investment. And then a neighboring country, I don't want to mention the name, and they say, okay, fine, come and, actually Angola. They say,
okay, it's Angola.
Come and invest.
Yes, okay.
And I said that, no, I won't invest in Angola because getting even visa was difficult.
Was difficult,
yes.
Yeah.
So, this thing we must free up and make sure that we allow Africans to move in. You can see, okay, fine. Today, when you talk to them, they say, I don't know, it's about security. But then I say, okay, fine. So most of these guys disturbing us in Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and Co., these guys, they don't have a visa. They don't even need a visa. They come through the land. So if they don't need a visa, why, me that I have money, I want to invest, you are harassing me? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So please, as Africans, we must actually, take this sort of political will in removing all these obstacles. Because, today you look at it, if I ask you today, what do you think is the easiest visa to get today? And they used to be the most difficult.
Rwanda? Saudi
Arabia.
Oh.
But it has actually opened up the economy. The economy is booming. Saudis are making too much money. Hotels that I used to go and pay $500, they are charging almost $2,000 because they are having avalanche of people arriving there. So why don't we even do something? We can say, okay, fine. If you have a visa since we don't trust ourselves in terms of security, you say, okay, fine. If you have a visa of UK or visa of European Union, visa of Canada, visa of America, when you come to Africa, we give you visa. Because those countries must have done all the security checks before they issue a visa. So let us latch behind
That's a clever idea.
But please, since I've seen a lot of our leaders here, what I think we need to do, we need to, first of all, make sure the regional markets, they have to work. The regional markets, they have to work. Because you see, right now, we are not allowing free trade, but the other side that are working against us, the smugglers, they are having a free trade. Okay, because, you can move goods from Benin, for example, into Nigeria. But those guys, you see them loading rice, loading stuff, and, going through the forest borders that we have. So, the African continent is one of the continents that I think it is a hidden story. It is a story that I believe when you have faith, you invest, you will make quite a lot of money. It's true, there are risks here and there, but there are also a lot of areas of mitigating risk. Once you do your own calculation, then you move in, and definitely the story is good.
I'm going to ask you one last question now, because I said it earlier before, that all this work we're doing is not really for us, it's for our children and our children's children, the next generation of Africans. How do we create 10 more Dangotes? Well, what's your advice for those young African entrepreneurs?
I think the young African entrepreneurs, first of all, there's quite a lot of opportunity. They have to work very hard. It's not that easy. I mean, for example, I've been in business today. I don't like it, but I've been in business today for 45 years. So it's been a great journey. You have to be focused. You have to make sure that you have a vision and you know exactly where to go, and make sure we as Africans, we must make sure that we have good local domestic banks. Okay, because if you don't have local domestic banks, you are not going to be given that opportunity to be able to even scale the first hurdle. So we are all given opportunity. We know we are not born with money. Yes, it's true. My grandfather, was rich, but he didn't, give me just free money to go and, trade. So you need strong financial institutions. And these guys, what they need to do is to now go calm down and make sure that, yes, they have the belief that, yes, things can happen. But it is not overnight. Majority of our youth, they are looking at making things happen the next day.
Patience is required.
Patience is required.
Yeah.
Tenacity is required. And also you have to be, you have to have a vision. You can't just jump into everything. You might not be good in everything.
Do you have to tell yourself, I will not fail, I believe this will succeed? You have to kind of...
You have to, yes, you have to believe in, yes, you have to, and I can tell you, especially with now, there are other modern ways of making money, technology.
You mean technology, fourth industrial revolution?
Technology, revolution, and so many other areas.
And our people are smart.
And our people are very, very smart. They are well educated. And I can tell you, within maybe a period of 10 years with AfCFTA and Co., you can even have not only one, you can have we can create 50 Dangotes. It's not difficult.
But there's only one Dangote, and it's you. So I'm going to ask you to stand up, and I'm going to ask everybody, please give a round of applause to the one and only Aliko Dangote.
Thank you.
Now. Okay, so back to the program at hand. I don't know what that gentleman is shouting, but I just heard the word Dangote, so we'll clap for that. Where are we at? Sorry, just get as we change the furniture around, we're going to go on to another session now. This session looks at a really important issue. It's called, before I actually continue, I just see Spot in the corner there. I want you to just put your hands together for another legend, the Nobel laureate himself, Professor Wole Soyinka is with us. Now, the next session looks at a very important issue. It looks at, it's called Building Prosperity for Africans, the Challenges of Peace and Security. Your moderator is Omar Ben Yedder, and he is the publisher of IC Publications. You'll know many of the magazines that they produce: Africa Business Magazine, New Africa Magazine, and the Africa Banker Magazine and the Africa Banker Award. So please welcome Omar Ben Yedder of IC Publications, your moderator for this session.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here for the bank's 30th anniversary and for this very important session. So I'm delighted actually that the issue of peace and security has been upgraded to the opening of the 30th anniversary of the AfCFTA. I was speaking to the Pioneer president a couple of weeks ago for an interview that we will be publishing soon. And he said actually, so looking back 30 years ago, the situation in Africa was a lot more challenging because there were a lot more issues of peace and security. So there was a lot more instability across the region. Nonetheless, we're seeing new fault lines appear, and we know that the single biggest barrier to trade ultimately is peace and security. Without peace and security, you will not be able to trade. And I think this is a very important issue that the bank wanted to highlight, and that the bank wanted to increase urgency towards dealing with our own peace and security issues. So I'm delighted to be welcoming with me on stage His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. A round of applause, please. General William E. Ward, former U.S. Army General and the first Commander of United States Africa Command. General, thank you. I've also got General Chris Abutu Garuba, former military observer of the UN Angolan Verification Mission and former Commander, National War College, Federal Republic of Nigeria. And finally, we've got General Dr. Emmanuel Kotia, who is the CEO of the Ghana Boundary Commission and a senior lecturer at the Ghana Command and Staff College, as well as other institutions. Thank you.